So a couple of months ago, I was on a podcast conference and there was this fella talking about how to get to 1 million downloads.
Wow.
The premise was just publish content enough. And you'll get there. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, that's one way to look at it. But the most effective ways to grow faster on a podcast is to do collaboration. So to tap into someone else's audience, right? Like invite guests, do a podcast swap, potentially.
Like what we're doing right now, inviting like, you on, similar audiences, but
I'm going to be like, I'm so excited to be on their show. Woo! Like, listen to them.
Exactly.
And it's like super fun. It's like, especially if you want to tap into knowledge that you normally don't have as much and you want to learn more, it's like double win.
Welcome back to Oh My Pod. My name is Justin J. Moore.
And I'm Celine.
And we are now on episode 10, and we have another amazing guest. We've really been enjoying doing these guest shows. I think that there's just a lot of people with a lot of incredible knowledge in the podcasting industry. So it's going to be really valuable today. Today we have Ana Xavier. She is the CEO of The Podcast Space. So Ana is originally from Portugal. She created her first podcast back in 2008. While completing her Bachelor's of Science in Communications and Journalism from the University of Porto. After a decade of experience in podcasting, broadcasting, and digital marketing in Portugal and London, UK, Ana moved to Dallas, Texas in 2016. As a skilled podcast producer and strategist, Ana saw the opportunity to help entrepreneurs get their message across, but also to create more meaningful impact in the world. In January 2020, she founded The Podcast Space, an online podcast consulting agency where she works specifically with female entrepreneurs who support the betterment of others and their common communities. Along the way, she mentors them to make a greater positive impact on their audience, as well as to become better hosts. Ana has worked with 50 plus podcasts through her consulting work, and her resources available on thepodcastspace.com. So Ana, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this interview, so I'm so happy to be here.
Well, it's been like kind of a long time coming because I think in like 2020 or something, I'd reached out to you because I was wanting to start a podcast for podcasting, but I didn't bite the bullet. I didn't have the space back then, but now I do. And so right away I reached back out to you.
Yes, honestly, it's so funny because, again, that's why I normally tell podcasters, hey, Instagram, social media is not the horror that you think it is, right? Like it can be a space for community. I mean, we've been kind of on each other's space for almost 3 years now, probably.
Absolutely, and which is crazy, right? Like,
I
know your content so well. I know the color. Like you do an incredible job across everything with the way that you create your content, like your YouTube, your podcast, your social media. It's all it's a good lesson for anybody who's trying to create a memorable brand. I really like it a lot.
Well, thank you. Yes, definitely. I do have an extensive knowledge about communication, but also marketing. So it does help to think about like, how is my brand perceived from the outside world? How do I create a brand that is recognizable, that makes you stop the scroll and engage with it, right? So that's definitely was a thought in the beginning of launching the company right away. I was like, I want to create a brand that, people recognize even without having the thousands of followers, the thousands of, like comments and all of that, because people can. And that's something that I always fight against is that, hey, you don't need to wait to wait until you have thousands. Start now, right?
Yeah. Make the brand memorable before it even goes anywhere, because you're gonna, you stick in people's minds. That's very true. And you've kept it very fun too.
We've heard that so many times over the last little bit that, podcasts that are very small are doing so incredibly well.
That's also true. Yeah. Really small podcasts have a huge impact on their their business. We'll get into that for sure. So why podcasting, and also what, in your words, does the podcast space do? Like, why would someone approach you for collaboration?
Yeah. So, wow, these two questions, I'm like, do I have a ready to go answer on that? I think podcasts...
Improv.
Right. I think podcasts really are the tool that most small business owners are missing from their strategy, right? most small business owners, and hey, if you are the person who's like, Anna, you are wrong and I'm the exception, good for you because you are the exception. For most business owners, they don't like creating blogs. They don't like creating thought leadership content. They just like, I just know what I know. And I mean, a podcast enables you to connect deeper with your audience and to talk about why they should be working with you in a way that doesn't feel salesy, that feels very safe and exciting. Because, I mean, unless you don't like what you do, you are probably passionate about talking about the thing that you work on, right? So you can't really do that on a 60-second video on social media. The passion that you have for the topic is not going to come across the best written blog post, right? And I mean, you can't inject personality that like connects in a few seconds with people like just podcasting does, right? Like the other day I received a message from someone who was like, oh, Anna, I've been listening to your show for like weeks now. And I just want to say that I love your voice. And in my head, I'm like, I'm just talking. You know what I mean? It's just like, I just hate most people's voices. And you just talk with so much confidence and authenticity. And you just really excite me about podcasting in a way that I didn't think possible. I was like, because it's my emotion in my voice, right? My confidence. And I think that, you know, that's something that is super powerful. So that's why people need podcasts in their life and why podcast is important right now. I kind of started into podcasting again when I was doing my bachelor's degree in journalism. It was more like a situation where most universities normally they have a radio station, but because it was like a building that was shared with another course, like we couldn't have like a closed circuit. This is like TMI, but whatever.
No, it's all good.
But so we actually had to go to the studio and record the episodes and put them together and then think about titles and descriptions. So this was actually podcasting in 2008. And it's so funny because people will be like, oh, it's just so complicated. Sure, it's a lot, but it's not as complicated as it was like, you know, in 2008 or well over 10 years ago, right? So totally. I think that was just such a powerful, and again, it was journalism and it wasn't really like, we had some documentaries and we did some talking to people and all of that, but like, my time in London gave me such a different perspective on podcasting. We did a lot of community events where we like do like, okay, I remember I did like an architectural tour in London and I would like go with a group of people and just kind of documenting the conversations and like weaving in my own thoughts. And I was like, this is so fun. And then I moved to the US and was like live streaming and such a different type of podcasting because you're more on it, and we had so many things go wrong, so many things go right.
Oh, I bet.
It was so funny that I was like, my goodness, like I used to do, I was a radio host at some point in Portugal, and it was just nothing beats the live element of podcasting because you know, you have to be prepared for everything. That's why I'm normally like, whatever, it's all good. Nothing bad can happen because everything that was like the worst case scenario, including turning off half the studio accidentally on a plug 10 minutes before going live and still making it live and going fine. I think that it's possible for anything to be fixed.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Totally.
Yeah, the whole live podcasting has a really big moment. I think it's getting bigger and bigger. People really like it.
And it's so effective for people who don't have time for pre-production, for post-production, right? Like you're doing the show, it's live. Once it ends, you're done. So
yeah,
totally.
That's cool. That's an avenue that I haven't even thought about is the live stuff. But what I really want to talk about today is with our clients and what we do, we focus on the production element of the podcast. So we're not necessarily a company for independent podcasters. We focus on helping sort of businesses and entrepreneurs outsource all their content, so that they don't actually have to, sit in front of their laptop for like an hour a week and figure out what are they going to post here, what are they going to post there. Like, as you well know, like a podcast can literally be made into, everything. You make LinkedIn articles, you've got blogs that are linked with a podcast episode, all the content is interlinked, like it's really like a beautiful way to do your entire content production. Sure. But one thing that is like obviously the standard question, it's usually like 1 to 2 questions, and it's if somebody is going to invest in something like starting a podcast, they want to know, number one, how is it going to grow? And number two, they want to know, how is it going to pay me back? Because nobody who's like, every business owner makes decisions every single day based on the return on their investment, whether their investment is time, whether their investment is energy, or money. They want to know that it's going to come back in some way. And describing the ROI accurately for all sorts of different people in all sorts of different industries is really hard, because there may be one client who, if they get a client, it's $50,000, right? There may be another client that if they get a client, it's only $1,000, right? It depends on what the person is offering. It depends on a lot of different things. So from your perspective, how can somebody actually, what are some ways that people can actually organically grow their podcast? And you were talking before we started the call about some pretty cool stuff about download numbers and how you don't need a ton of downloads to get some serious ROI. So honestly, just go off of that and do your thing, because you are the expert here, 100%.
Well, thank you. I think I kind of missed the second part of your previous question, so I'm gonna weave that into my answer so that nothing gets unanswered.
Sweet.
So basically, one of the things that I love is I'm a content machine. I'm an incredibly creative person, but I'm very strategic. So instead of just saying, "Hey, create content and put it out there," which is normally how people think of podcasts, it's like, what type of content is aligned with the type of goal that you have for the podcast? The number one thing that nobody thinks about, most people don't think about when publishing a podcast. And so I want the listener thinking about this first. What is the goal with this podcast first? Before you even hit go on, thinking about the title, thinking about the description, thinking about what you would talk about. It's like, what is the goal? And then you create a strategy that aligns with that, because a content strategy that is based on helping you make meaningful networking decisions with decision makers in your industry, it's going to be super different than the type of post that is the type of content that is for, building authority or getting you leads
or getting clients or something.
Yes,
yeah,
correct.
Exactly.
Or growing the sales of your company. So first you have to get so clear on why are you giving time to this project, and first decide that, and then think about, for that type of goal, what content does guide me to end up on that journey, right? Because a podcast is like a marathon. You can't publish an episode today and get results immediately, right? And so if your goal is just to network with decision makers, because let's say you want to get more speaking gigs and you want to be in front of these people, you can record a podcast episode. I mean, I had clients that recorded 10 episodes back to back, even before launching the podcast, and they made a lot of money just with that. Or they wanted to get a head start because they're like, well, I'm transitioning my career. I want to become a speaker. I know that I won't be, charging money for my speaking initially. So how can I get ahead?
One question about, before you move on, about, you said that they recorded 10 interviews. So you had a client who recorded 10 interviews with industry leaders within their industry, or big networking opportunities. And they recorded those interviews. And then before they even launched their podcast, because they made these, they had these virtual coffee dates with these people, or whatever, as we like to call them, they already made income. They made revenue from those 10 conversations. How did they make money? What was the amount, or how did they even get that income, if people are probably wondering about that?
Right. Okay. So you can directly monetize the podcast and indirectly monetize the podcast. If you're doing these interviews, you're kind of indirectly monetizing the podcast because your listeners are not paying you. You're not getting, for instance, a sponsorship on the show, right? Those are normally the two types of ways. The third one being charging people to be on your show. I had clients that did that too.
Yeah.
I don't think that is a very, for most business owners, it's not great to build a brand on that, because sometimes you have to accept people who are not aligned with your show. So not the best, but again, that can be done. In terms of numbers, I cannot tell you because the client did not disclose with me. I just kept up with, what was going on. And so I do know that one of my clients was doing that, not to get speaking gigs, but to close a deal, like you were talking about. And I think it was maybe a $10,000. But again, what I wanted people to consider is that you do not need to make $10,000 because for some people, this is a passion project. And so, for instance, indirectly monetizing the podcast, quote unquote, could be you want to be in an industry. So let's say, like, I love gardening. And so let's say that I would love to know more and get connected with people in the gardening industry, but I don't want to stop being a podcast strategist. So for me, the money that I make every month on my job allows me to have this passion project that fills me up with so much happiness and joy. And I see that a lot where I had a ton of clients who were like, well, I don't want to go there, but I still want to make that meaningful connection. I'm like, yeah, but like you don't have to monetize the podcast directly. Like you can use it as a tool, as a creative outlet for your job, for the job that you don't, how would I say this? For the job that you have, if you don't have that fun, that passion into it, you can have a side project. And for you, it's like, some people love going to the gym. Some people have a podcast. So, what is the missing piece in your life that you can, use a podcast to solve that missing piece? For some people, that's invaluable. That's worth it. Getting that like producer that cuts videos because they just are reminded they are living their passion. So today is so important to really be a fulfilled person, and a podcast can do so much of that. And then, for instance, like some of my clients, they looked at monetizing the show because they're like, I don't like writing articles. I absolutely hate writing. It's literally empty page syndrome. But get me in front of a microphone and I can talk for hours. So for them, instead of paying a copywriter to write for them and record voice messages to get the message across, they're doing the podcast. And so we use the content to be blogs for the company, but also the weekly newsletter, because she was like, I can't be consistent every month. And so they were like, that has enabled us to be top of mind on the low months where nothing is happening. And then into like the bigger months, clients have been consistently hearing from us. And so when they're ready, they'll come to us. So I had a client who for 6 months, we were just pumping content. It was very low in terms of engagement, but that's the thing. If you're a small business owner, if 100 people contact you at the same time, you're going to lose your crap because you're like, I don't have the capacity, the bandwidth to respond to all of this. But if you are keeping people as a way to warm up your leads through time, people will reach out to you as time goes. So if it's 20 listeners, they are like every single week consuming your episodes, it's 20 potential leads for your business.
Well, also then on top of that, it's the people listening to the podcast, but it's also getting in front of people on any social media channels that you also have. Like, for instance, Instagram Reels, just, putting out a few of those a week and having your voice and your face in front of people. It also, it does build that up. So you're kind of saying that like podcasting is, and this is a way I never thought about it, is maybe podcasting is maybe a way for, people to kind of get familiar or become familiar to the people listening and the people consuming the content, so that down the road, when this is the right move for them, which it very well may be, they have you at top of mind because you're the one in their mind as the podcast person or the person, whatever kind of content that you're producing. If you're producing stuff about fitness or about business, they have you in mind because they've seen so much of your content. They've become really trustworthy of you.
What was that statistic that we were just talking about? The people that are not ready to buy, but they're going to be.
There's 50% of the market that's completely uninterested in what you're offering. There's 3% of the market that's looking to buy immediately. And then there's 47% that will buy within a year.
Exactly.
And so...
that's exactly what you're targeting here. And that's actually... I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, that's exactly the way to do it, because you want to convert all those 47%, like all those people, into clients whenever they are ready. And like that, like podcast is perfect for that, or however you repurpose your podcast. Yeah,
totally.
And it's funny, let me just do a little note on that. I have people about social media. The problem with social media, quote unquote problem, is that you have to keep pumping content, right?
Yeah.
But with a podcast, I have the episodes, I am always looking at analytics, because if you don't look at the analytics, you can't make informed decisions about your content. And I was looking at my analytics, and I was like, episodes that I released back in February, we are recording this at the end of May. I mean, I still have episodes that are being listened to right now. And so did I do anything? No, I just have a catalog that is available with the type of questions that I know my listeners will want the answers for. And so you don't have to constantly be pumping content. They are there. They will listen whenever they're ready.
Yep.
For sure. 100%. We see that with our clients all the time, that like certain episodes just get sometimes played just as much as the new ones. It's crazy.
I had someone that told me that they listened to my titles episode 5 times. 5 times.
Well,
and I was like, why is this like consumption rate so high? And I'm like, oh, that's why.
It's an easy way to become an expert on something, is to just replay it. I've done that as well. I've done it like a few times. You can just replay it and it just kind of burns into your brain. But onto the sort of organic growth of a podcast. So if you do want to increase listenership, grow your audience, how can you do it in a way where it doesn't take up a huge amount of your time, but still does what you need it to do, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So great question. One is, ask yourself, how much time do I have? Second question, how techie am I? Because a lot of my clients, when they come to me, when it's a consulting kind of call, they're like, oh, I'm doing this, and this, and this, and this. But also, Anna, I hate technology, and I don't like, kind of change. I'm like, why did you give yourself the most complicated process in the world? Like, no.
Yeah.
So I think that is assessing, like, one, how much time do you have? Second, how techie are you? Like, and it does not need to be technology itself. Is like, if you don't like having multiple pieces of content to play around and have to like insert and play sounds and stuff like that, like, don't go down that road.
Right.
But then how fast do you want those results to start happening? And for people who want results immediately and they want to grow their business, maybe it's inviting people that have been warm leads but haven't bought for whatever reason, inviting them on the show. So that's the strategy that you need to look at. And it's different for everyone. Like, there's people who say, I am terrible on sales calls. And I'm like, well, then invite them on the show and don't care for the audience, right? Like, your organic growth is not there when your goal is to increase sales by inviting the people who will buy from you. I had people that
interesting.
Don't care.
Yeah.
They literally had like 5 listens to like downloads on every episode. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cringe. And the client was ecstatic. They're like, oh my God, I got to like have some cooler talk with like so-and-so. And it was like, in terms of content, it was not great. They were just kind of like talking about these projects that they did together. For the person listening, I was like, what are you talking about? I don't understand anything. But they were having the best time. And this client closed a ton of deals because the clients were like, oh my God, so excited to, have that time with you. Thank you for featuring me. So it has nothing to do with growing organically if your goal is not to grow at all. Now, for the people who do want to.
Who want to get up to 500 downloads an episode, if that's like their star in the sky that they're aiming at.
So a couple of months ago, I was on a podcast conference and there was this fella talking about how to get to 1 million downloads. The premise was just publish content enough. And you'll get there. And I was like, okay, that's one way to look at it. But the most effective ways to grow faster on a podcast is to do collaboration. So to tap into someone else's audience, right? Like invite guests, do a podcast swap, potentially.
Like what we're doing right now, inviting like, you on, similar audiences, but
I'm going to be like, I'm so excited to be on their show. Woo! Like, listen to them.
Exactly.
And it's like super fun. It's like, especially if you want to tap into knowledge that you normally don't have as much and you want to learn more. It's like double win.
That's another thing that we're doing right now, because you like, I'm just like taking in the information right now at the same time.
Right.
For sure.
One of the things that this is like such a like, it sounds silly because it's so basic, but it's so effective. If you want to grow faster, publish more. Instead of publishing one episode a week, publish 2 a week. Your downloads are going to jump. And so if you want to, get a sponsorship or invest in your podcast down the line on ads or stuff like that, if you publish more, you will get more downloads. You'll get more people consuming through more episodes. Now, of course, you don't want to create a 3-hour episode because nobody has 3 hours in their day to listen to you every other day if you're releasing like 3 episodes a week.
Yeah, of course. Okay.
But effectively, it's like the more you talk about it on social media, online, the more downloads, the faster you will grow. So the number one mistake I see podcasters make is just talking. The episode is out. And it's like literally the static cover art that says the title of the episode. And the caption is, new episode is out.
Right? Nobody cares about that. Like, nobody cares about that.
No, and also you're not giving people any reason to listen because you're not telling what the episode is or something like this. These are my 2 faux pas that I was like, please don't do this. It's like the share with us your like most inspirational like lesson from this episode. And I'm like, you did not tell them anything about the episode. So that like they cannot really have a reason to listen if you didn't tell them what it was.
Not.
Or also like listen to their inspirational story. And I'm like, what is it?
Yeah,
right.
Like what's
going to
get me? You better have a really good reason for me to get off of Instagram and go onto a streaming platform, because that is I've heard this 50 times.
Yeah.
That's one of the hardest transitions to make. Whether you're trying to get somebody to go and listen to like a song because I'm also in the music industry, and whether you're trying to get somebody to listen to a song, or whether you're trying to get somebody to listen to a podcast or anything that's outside of the platform that they're on, that's a major point of pain. Like people are in pain to leave their platform and go type something in. Like it's got to be. I mean, that's why we produce just tons of clips for our clients. Like we recommend 4 episodes a month, and out of those 4 episodes, we create 20 clips. Like, there you go. Post those.
Yeah. I think another really important point that a lot of people think it's not really necessary, but like make it easy for people, because like people are lazy. If there's no link to click, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go on Google and look for your podcast to try to even find it. Sometimes I don't even know what it's called. Sometimes I don't find it on Apple Podcast with like a normal search, because sometimes it just doesn't show up. I'm like, just put a link.
Yeah.
And like have the links everywhere in your stories, just to tap, and in your bio, because otherwise like I'm not going to do it unless I'm like over the moon to listen to it.
Yes.
Then I will look for it.
And that's where like the benefit of like not doing your own editing, because you are on the other side. You don't have that connection like face to face as like normally the host has. They sometimes don't even know what is worthwhile, what isn't, what is known to the audience, what isn't, what is marketable, what isn't. Right. So there's so much benefit with working with someone else who does not do the work you do.
Yeah, they just find what's interesting to them, and those are the pieces that come out of the episodes. Plus, I mean, you just get some really, really awesome content for social media. Like, I mean, isn't it nice to, instead of see like the still posts of whatever the guest who came on, isn't it nicer to go and look and see like, oh, that moment when you were excited, or that moment where the person was saying something really meaningful, or this little snippet that could change somebody's life if they're in that position, or it's like, oh, like, you know, there's a way to outsource content without losing the personal feeling of it, like you do when you outsource to a company that maybe just posts stock images or you know, so it's like outsource, but also still maintain like your face and your personality and the passion in your voice when you speak about something that you love doing. These are like, this is the new way of creating content. I truly believe in that.
Yeah, and if you look, for instance, at a platform like TikTok and Instagram, I mean, this is like the tip that I want the podcaster who's like, I've been doing my teasers for a while, nothing is happening. I'm like, putting like an audio waveform or a static image with just like an audio form moving without any captions is not making someone stop and listen to it. Because about 60% of people listen to watch Instagram and TikTok with the sound off, and they just read the captions. Yeah, so if you don't have it, nobody's going to consume it there. Scroll.
Yeah, 100%.
And so
exactly.
And so basically that's a really good tip. But also like in terms of video, I like one of the strongest That's like the gold standard. The two gold standards for podcast users, in my opinion, are the Mel Robbins podcast and Steven, the Diary of a CEO. They make phenomenal teasers, but they're video.
Yes. We don't do anything without video for clients. Yeah. We don't even work with clients for just audio anymore. No. It's just not what our business thrives on. And we can't confidently provide the best service that we feel that we can provide without having video be a part of it. Mm-hmm. And I completely agree. Like, I think that at least for what we do, maybe not for like the storytelling audio drama medium, but for what we are doing, like, people got to see your face. People have to see your face. Yes, it's 100%. So important. So I think that's really cool that you said that. And
you were talking about in one of your episodes how people, like a small brand, cannot afford to be faceless anymore, right? Yeah. Like, you have to connect to the person.
That came straight from Neil Patel, who is one of the hosts of Marketing School, which is an amazing 5 minute daily podcast. Mm-hmm. They do all 30 of their episodes in one sit down, by the way, in a month for the whole daily. So that's their technique. They talked about that once. But he just said, people don't want faceless companies anymore. Nobody wants that, especially if you're just starting. If you're trying to build a brand, sure, you can still build a business. And this doesn't apply to everybody, but why don't you just build your business with a couple faces being part of the brand? You can have your logo. We have our logo, but you also need one or two or three people to go alongside the logo so that people see the logo and associate the people all with the brand. And there's some type of connection there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And you want to see people talking and messing up, making mistakes, laughing, looking stupid here and there. Just the transparency is really important, I think, between small businesses and their clients now. Maybe not in every industry, but definitely in a lot of them. people want to know who they're working with. They want to know
they
their
want to know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah. So any more thoughts on that, or should I go on to the next part?
I have always a lot of thoughts on everything, but let's move forward.
Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club. I feel like we're all quite similar in that. So I want to talk... I still want to get more into the actionable tips for the indie podcaster, or not even the indie podcaster, maybe somebody who's even hiring us, things that they can do. So what would be the best ROI for podcasters if they were looking to spend a bit of money on some type of paid advertising or I don't know, something like that?
Well, I don't do paid advertisement, but I can talk about what I think is... that's okay. We can talk about that. So
sure, okay.
Basically, I will say do not just throw money at things, because honestly, I think that the best money you can spend is actually making sure that you're using your content as a tool. Because so many people have fantastic content, but they promoted it once. And so spend that money getting someone to actually to do the things that you don't want to do. Is that to post the content, to cut out videos. That is the thing that is going to connect people, because it will take time for someone to want to buy from you and trust you. So it's staying in the long term. Just confidently knowing that whatever you're creating is amazing and will convince someone to buy. So I think that the organic way is the way.
Yep. Okay, so that is literally spend your money on producing more content that will then grow organically. So I think that's a fantastic tip. So
and I mean, even a virtual assistant, if you really hate scheduling your posts, even think about that. Just get somebody that does that for you if you really hate it, because I do think those parts make a huge difference.
Because I think that most people, I agree, most people think about it. I don't like doing it, therefore I'm not doing it.
Right. And get somebody else to do it then.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Just if you're charging $320 an hour or whatever it is, you can find an assistant for way less time. And especially is what type of person are you wanting to hire? Someone that just does the task, or someone who is strategic?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we used to have a few people that would have the content because we created it for them, but then they wouldn't really post it.
Exactly. They're
And,
paying
like,
for
That's
it.
the other thing. Yeah.
You're paying for it. What are you doing? Like, get on it. And if you don't want to do it, get your assistant to do it. Like they have assistants, other assistants. If you don't have one, get one, or like a virtual assistant even. Right? Like, wasted money.
And it does not take that much time to train someone. That's the consulting part that I have actually so much fun doing, because sometimes the client comes to me and say, hey, Anna, I want to talk to you with my assistant on it. We will talk about strategic steps we can take. I will pay you, the consultant, to tell my person who is more affordable to do the steps that she will have to do in order to grow my podcast. And that's such a clever way to do it too, because the person's like, I cannot afford to pay you, a monthly retainer, but I can pay you like a 3-hour meeting where you discuss where are the winning points, what haven't we been doing, and then go down that route. Because again, some people are phenomenal at just learning. And I had that situation where the assistant actually went down to do podcasts, specifically assisting podcast hosts on sharing the content, because it's like, I get it now. I know what I need to do. And I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great idea.
What kind of effects have you seen personally starting a podcast have on some businesses or on some of your clients? Like, what do they report back to you? Like, I'm just thinking, why should somebody start a podcast? Like, what are they going to get back, and what are the main reasons?
Normally, I just work with clients who have been podcasting for a while and can't see the return on investment. And normally, there's there's two things: either the misalignment between the goal of their podcast and the content that they're putting out there.
Okay.
And then the second is they're doing too many things and they have no idea what actually works. And so giving them direction on the things that will have impact, and when they are overcomplicating things, for instance, like, I'll give you a very clear example. I had such a mental block because I'm not a native English speaker. I was so afraid of making mistakes writing a newsletter, because I was like, my grammar must be impeccable. And I'm like, all I can think about is like all the languages that I speak, and sometimes the grammar just like mixes and fumbles. And I was like, you know what? I have no issues writing social media captions. And when I made that, like, I hacked myself. I was like, okay, you know what? Every newsletter is going to be like a massive caption for Instagram. And then I started doing it like way easier. So that was like an unlock in my brain. It's like, oh, and for most business owners, it's also like, what is holding you back, right? But I think that I forgot your question. I'm sorry.
You were totally on the right path. It's what do you do with clients, and what results do you get a client? Like, what are the results that your company gets for people?
Okay. Yes. We could talk about that. Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah, no worries.
Sometimes I get so into the answer that I was like, wait, I forgot.
It's a good problem to have. Don't worry about it.
Right. So yeah, all of this can stay because this happens for most people.
Of course.
So basically, I want to give a few examples on different ROAs. So, for instance, for one client, her podcast was super niche. And what it means is that she had a very small audience, but the potential of that audience was high paying. This was an executive coach that works with, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. And so she had such a small listenership, like 60 downloads per episode, roughly that. But one of the things that she noticed a big shift is when we started doing solo episodes, not just interviews with guests, because she was kind of almost like hiding behind the guest. But she started noticing that in those those episodes, the solo ones were so short. It was really wild, under 10 minutes. And so each episode that she did on solos started warming up the leads way faster than those interviews that she had been doing for 2 years. And so that was so interesting. And so she closed a deal that was $7,000, which was amazing. But it was so funny because the client told her hey, by the way, I listened to this one episode that was a solo episode. And I was like, ha, 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 I told you. That solo episode gave her a bigger ROI than all these other episodes that were 40 minutes long, super, complex and all that. And this solo episode was so good. And again, to your point earlier, sitting down for an hour, recording a bunch of episodes, and then having content for a month is saving you so much money. So that was a great example.
Yeah.
And then another client that her time was like, we had been working together for about 3 years. And so in 3 years, she hired a total of 6 people. But she was able to connect with one of her dream organizations, and they did a sponsorship. It was not paid, but it was like kind of like she was like the media partner for that company. And so she got the social clout of having like that organization be partnering up with her and really creating
on her podcast, sponsoring her podcast. Oh,
yes,
great,
like a consistent collaboration of content with that organization. And she was like, locally, 1, no one else was doing a podcast. 2, no one else ever got that. And here's the thing. She did not approach them. They came to her. How amazing is that?
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's great.
Right? Like
That's
better
awesome.
stamp of approval for someone to work with you than, hey, this massive organization that is known worldwide wanted to work with you. It was a local chapter, but it doesn't matter because it's a local organization. So that in itself has, through time, I cannot quantify because I don't know, but I know that she's constantly, and she will text me, oh my God, so-and-so send me this like message, and then like not just them, but like 2 other people from that circle, from the circle of that one person ended up working with my client because it was all of these amazing content that she's been building through time. She is the person to go to in her local town. And this was like, honestly, we only broke 30,000 downloads on the 3rd year.
Right.
But she was always using the podcast as, instead of being on the phone with someone, she was like, hey, listen to this episode. And
so using
cool
it as
that?
a frequently asked questions section rather than on a website with the frequently asked questions. Yeah. So educating prospective and current clients on things that she would say over and over again, rather just send them an episode.
And this client had like for the longest time she had like 60 downloads per episode, 70, 120 if the topics were really, really good. Like some of those, what I call the super episodes, like you were talking about earlier, Celine, those episodes were really good. But like the lead, like if she was to pay money for that, like, my God, each lead was so valuable. Like,
yeah, of course.
And this is free content that she's posting, like episodes that we got 3 years ago that still get listened to, and she gets leads from that content. Cool? How cool is that?
Do you have anything to say to add to that, Celine, or?
Yeah, I was like thinking about a lot of things while you were talking, to be honest. Like we definitely have clients where the solo episodes do way better than interviews, which is really cool, because I think that people are just really interested in their expertise, and because they know that they are that they know their stuff very well, and so they like listening to them specifically, as well as
well, the stone, like we have a client who's a realty group, and they within the first 8 episodes that we produced for them, they sold one of their listings. So that was a massive return on their investment.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was like right at the beginning of our company. And I realized like, oh man, like if it can do that, then this is something really, really big.
Yeah, for sure.
I was wondering, do you find that like that people bringing guests on their show is like, how do you help people kind of figure out like, okay, I want to bring these guests on my show and then give them content to cross promote, or like also like feed drops on other podcasts? Like, do you think that collaboration with other people in the industry, or even slightly outside of the industry, because there's lots of industries that are interconnected, is like landing good guests, is that something that you highly recommend to people? What are your thoughts on that?
It depends. I haven't been involved in that side of feed drops. I'm more like content itself, as in like, what do you create? I have, though, worked with a client. This was like 3 years ago now, but a podcast episode she recorded with a real estate agent. She was an Airbnb she runs her Airbnbs for people. And so she did an episode with a real estate agent. And so we actually repurposed the episode. I cut it in a specific time. And so she recorded her own intro, and the episode got really well. And again, she recorded the episode once. So that was good. I would say I haven't tried that myself. I actually have, like, right now, 2 conversations individually, like, about that, doing a feed drop with another podcast, another podcast. And basically, I think it's the best because, one, it just depends. Look, if you want to save yourself some time, you play someone else's episode, you just record an intro, right? Like, it can be because you don't have time, or you're like, something happened, you're like, hey, there's this big connection that I have. I think that it does a lot more to warm up the person that you're doing the feed swap with, but also it's free advertisement from another audience, right? And I think in terms of converting audiences is so much easier to get other people to listen to you when you've been on a podcast that is already consumed by people that consume podcasts. So instead of
they're already on the platform.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very big for sure.
And
I hear that all the time.
Yeah, just because you are talking about the same thing, like in the same industry, like for instance, we are all working in the podcast industry, but you have such different outlook or different takes or like a specific take on something. Different. Yeah, it doesn't mean that your audience will not become listeners to mine. Like, for instance, some people said, oh, hey, I listened to this episode with Nick Redmond or Lloyd, and I listened to them on their show, and now I follow them. Thank you for like mentioning them. And I'm like, of course. And so same to me. Some people are like, oh, I listened to your interview on so and so, and I'm now like a fan of your show, subscribed. I was like, woohoo. Or people, your own audience. I want to refer to something that you mentioned earlier. So I don't look at podcast promotion, like the content of the podcast. The end goal isn't always to get them to subscribe, is to meet them where they are. Because for me, the biggest investment is to have diversification. So people who've been with me on Instagram for 2 years, once I launched the podcast, it took them 2 months because I asked them in the beginning, I said, hey, have you listened? And then they told me when they started listening, and it was about like 2 months and a half, almost 3 months. So it took them 3 months for them to see my content every single week, promotion after promotion. They're in my email list, but they only, when their pain point was so big, they eventually listened to the episode in audio format. But they were consuming and engaging on social media, sharing it with their community. But my goal isn't always to make sure that person on social media becomes a listener. I'm just adding value where they are. And when you're
creating, you're using the different channels for what they're used for. You're not trying to drive everybody to one spot. You're saying, well, if you're on Instagram, then here's something for you over there, and like, no questions asked. Don't worry about it. It's only when the person has come to the mindset of their own accord, where they say, you know what, now I need more, and where do I get more? Okay, oh right, her, I saw that, well, let me go check, and then bang, now you've got somebody listening through all your stuff. So that's an interesting point that you made.
Yeah, so instead of like just saying, let's say you post 4 times about content that was on the podcast, just tell them about it once to go and listen on the platform. Everything else is to tell them, yeah, sure, this is an episode on this, but like the call to action isn't just go and listen, because it's a high friction item. Like, to your point, to get people off the platform is forever, and people get annoyed at that. So I provide value. They're still getting enriched, but they do know that there's a podcast. So whenever they will be there listening. And so I think 100%. That for podcasters is important to know not everything has to lead to subscribe to the show or listen to the episode.
Right.
I have a question. How important do you think are captions for Reels on Instagram?
Super important.
Do you think people do you think they get read a lot?
Hang on. Not captions, not like under the video?
Yeah,
yes.
Not in the like actual Instagram.
Undertitled.
Yeah. I know, because they're referred to captions in both. So sometimes I don't even know.
True, actually,
I see what you're saying.
No, I mean actually under the video, because I feel like on Reels nobody really reads.
No.
Rather than like posts do, like the caption gets read on posts, I think. A little bit, but not really on Reels, whereas only like the subtitles really matter,
Yes.
in my opinion.
Agree,
Right?
because the user experience is rubbish. Because
Yeah,
you
so there
can't
you
read
go.
properly. The video doesn't pause.
Correct.
Yes. So
Right, there you
correct.
go.
if people are
Yeah.
trying to be strategic, as to your point, use a longer caption on a carousel post or a single image, but not on Reels, because especially on Instagram. But yes, I agree.
That's what I was thinking as well.
So last question, or I actually have one more after, but second last question then. This one I really want like I want to know, honestly, because I want to know exactly what to tell people if they were to ask this. So if somebody wants to do a podcast and they genuinely do not have a ton of time, but they want to do the pieces that are the highest value for their time, so the highest return on their time investment, and they like, obviously they want to do like let's say a weekly podcast, but I'm just thinking, like, it's really hard to sell somebody on the idea of like posting everywhere all the time, taking all your content and doing all these things. Like what are the essential pieces for somebody who is a business person, like a busy person running their own business or something of the sorts, and they want to do podcasting in a way that will get them clients and recognition, but doesn't take up a ton of their time? Like, is it just working with a company, or what do you think?
Guest on podcasts.
Being a guest on other podcasts.
I think that
see, that's something we didn't even get into. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say maybe try to create really like small, the smallest episode you can, because okay, there's a lot on your question. So basically, I would say if you are in the publishing side, publish onto two separate platforms. They are not owned by the same company. Do not post on Facebook and Instagram. But also ask, where are people? Because there's two sides to this. One, always post where already you are seeing traction. But second, post on the second platform if that can be the platform where there's potential for the biggest audience.
Right. So maybe like LinkedIn for somebody in the entrepreneurial world, and then maybe Instagram or Facebook or something on top of that.
Yes. So
plus the podcast on Spotify and Apple and all that.
Yes, exactly. I agree. So one of the things that has worked really well for me, and I'm like, okay, this is like the ultimate hack. So I have an email list, like you were saying before. I publish my app. Again, it's like a total beginning to end in terms of promoting my podcast, starting, scripting, recording, editing, publishing everywhere. It's a minimum of 6 to 8 hours. And I am fast and I am effective. And I am very prolific in like creating stuff. For people who are not, this will be a lot more. But
absolutely,
LinkedIn has been the biggest secret. Like, I created a newsletter on LinkedIn, which is a duplication of my regular newsletter that I send out through ConvertKit. And so I actually embed the episode. I put the newsletter as if it was an article, and I share it as a post. So I do 3 things in one, and that has been super effective. I've been starting to get approached by people who saw my content on LinkedIn, right? Yeah. So definitely the best platform to be in if you are a professional is LinkedIn. Also because people are primed to do business with other people.
That's
so
what
you'll get less friction.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but then guest as much as possible if you are busy, because you don't have to edit. You don't have to pay for any of that to be done. Right, and normally the host will do the teasers for you. They just tag
and send you some content, That's a good point. So and then I guess if people have like an assistant or something who can go and find podcasts that they could be on, that would probably be a really good way to do it. Yeah,
and there's so many tools that you can use.
There's lots of guesting services. How is your email list, like, how does that work for your podcast? Have you found that that's been a good mix, like having an email list for somebody with a podcast?
I had people who this is where I'm like, it's sure I have a smaller audience. I have 580 subscribers plus the 280 on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn has grown the fastest, and I've been writing newsletters since the beginning of my company because I knew marketing would be so important for the growth of my company.
Yeah, totally.
So I would have people who have been lurking for months. And one day on these newsletter that I sent out that I was like, this sucks in my head. This sucks. Like, it's not as high level because I'm huge on creating imperfect content. Hey, is there value here? I think that to your point is, what is the value of this content? Don't overcomplicate it. What is the one thing that you want the listener to know out of this episode? Say that. It's better to create a short newsletter, not complicated at all, and send it out. But I like looking at my newsletter as my backup for if social media implodes. And that's why I'm on Instagram is where, because I'm a creative person, it just happens that like it's the platform I prefer to be in. But I am on LinkedIn and then my newsletter. Like those are the non-negotiables that I always do. And I think that if you are a small business owner, those are really good to focus on. So newsletter for sure. I had people that, subscribe to the newsletter for 6 months and then suddenly I said something about like, oh, I'm Portuguese, whatever. And they're like, hey, do you happen to speak Spanish? I need help with my podcast. And this, cool. I never even, I think I made a PS, like, hey, do you need help? Let me know. And out of the blue, that person was like, hey, do you know any Spanish? And I was like, yes. And I had minimal fraction from that one newsletter that in my head was like, it sucks. And that person was like ready. They had that pain point. So consistency, whatever you can do it. But newsletter has been, because email marketing is like the OG stuff almost, right?
Yeah, totally.
It will continue being. But again, you can do the most simple thing, link to the episode and do it. So I've been running, I'm a consultant. So sometimes I'm like, hey, sale has not done anything. It's the content itself. People recognize the pain point in what I've written and they're like, yes, let's go. So
Very cool.
So do you work with clients that are not English a lot as well?
Yeah,
I was
Portuguese,
wondering.
Spanish, and English.
Very cool. Yeah, that's not something that we really have the capacity to do, although we've discussed it a few times because you can't help everybody in the world unless you're able to offer editors in different languages. But the editing part I think is tricky because our editors, they speak English. That's it, right? So how can you edit a podcast that you don't know what they're saying? It's impossible. Yeah. But we're coming up on an hour, and these are always super fun because it really does fly by. The time really does fly by. Learned a ton from you because you have a very different perspective than how we've been approaching podcasting. But that's the beauty of it. It's an industry that's filled with all sorts of people doing all sorts of different things, and so there's it's you can go over there and see people doing, this type of podcasting, and over there, and you got people getting millions of downloads, and then you go that way, you've got 5 downloads, but tons of revenue from it. So there's just all sorts of things that it can do, but it really is a tool that business owners or, entrepreneurs, business owners, anything like that, anybody who's selling things or trying to make professional network connections or anything like that, it's just like a one-stop shop for kind of the whole package of what they need to be doing. And I think that's kind of what we went over here. And also just the fact that, you can sit down and talk to people who are passionate about what you're passionate about and have these back and forth conversations that they'd be valuable even if they weren't being recorded. We could still sit down and have this conversation and it still would be valuable. But because we're recording it, it's twice as valuable because you also are completing all these other tasks while you're having your conversation. So that's something that people I just don't think about enough. It's just podcasting is just an easy excuse to get talking to whoever you want to talk to. Not whoever, but right. We couldn't get Ryan Reynolds on this show, but you can get Lucky on the show, right?
Hello.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. No, we're pretty niche. I honestly don't see that in the future of him coming onto a podcast about podcasting.
It could if he has a podcast. Hello.
If he was a podcaster, for sure. Yeah.
There you go.
For sure.
Honestly,
I want to add on one thing to your comment. I would say that so many people get too much in their head about the type of podcast host they should be, or that they're not good enough. And I'm like, just be yourself. the person that you are as a business owner is doing business. Why wouldn't that be the case with a stranger that is listening to you instead of booking a sales call? Right. So you don't need to be
just
someone
like real
else.
life, be yourself. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
100%.
That's enough.
Yeah, that's great advice. So obviously the last part will be, where can people find you? And do you have anything coming up in the future that people might be interested in?
Yes. So thank you for having me. This was amazing. And just getting to know you guys a bit better was just phenomenal. And also, like, I'm looking forward to hearing from your listeners. If you are listening to this show and you're super curious about what I do, you can find me, as I mentioned, on Instagram and on LinkedIn. I'm Ana Xavier, like Professor Xavier from X-Men on LinkedIn. But on Instagram, I'm at The Podcast Space. And I love getting to know people about like what their goal with the podcast is, help them with the content strategy. And 98% of the times is just about just making things simpler for you so that you can, go ahead and have an enjoyable experience podcasting. If you go to thepodcastspace.com, you can subscribe to the podcast there, because I do have my own podcast. And
we're going to link that in the bio so that it's easy, because that can be a hard link to find. So we'll put that right first thing. I think the first thing we'll put is your podcast, because honestly, I've been through there already. I sent one of your videos to our copywriters so that they could get like more knowledge about how to write their episode titles. I just sent that to like our Slack chat a couple days ago. So, and LinkedIn, you're right about LinkedIn. That's where I sent that from. I saw that on LinkedIn, and I linked the video. Like, I went to the blog, found the video on YouTube, linked it to them, and I said, just flip through this. I'll pay you for the time that you spend. Just listen, take notes, and make our content better from it. So you're doing awesome stuff. It's a niche industry that we're in, helping people start podcasts, but it's not. I don't really think it's going to be for much longer. It's becoming quite mainstream.
It is, but normally I tell people, hey, competition will weed itself out. And for every person who's listening right now, it's like, I would love to have a podcast, but, insert whatever silly doubt that they have in their mind. I know that for you, it feels like everybody has a podcast, but most people stop after reaching, episode 15, episode 10. So
exactly.
Just
many of them are they're not even active anymore.
No. Exactly.
Like I think Fatima, who was Fatima Zaidi, who was on one of our clients' podcasts, she said there's like 2-point-something million podcasts and like 450,000 active ones.
Yes.
So the numbers are diluted, like highly diluted. You can literally you can get rid of 75% of the total shows, and those are your competition.
And they're not even sometimes the competition, because they may be like, nobody's listening. If you're doing a business show and there's like a kids show, the kids show is not your competitor. Unless the person has kids and like is forced to listen to whatever
there
show.
You go. Exactly. That is a huge point to make. Yeah. So I'm sure that we could we could go on forever. But we'll stop there. And honestly, I would like to, maybe down the road, but even have you back on when you've got, you said that you have some exciting stuff coming up, some training courses that you're working on and stuff. So could definitely reconnect down the road. But thank you for your time. It's super, super valuable to have people like you on this show, for us, for anybody that finds this content on Instagram and social media, and for anybody that finds this on podcasting. I'm sure like this is filled with little pieces of great information. So
yes. And replay the episode 1,000 times until you got it all.
Exactly.
Yes.
Notes.
Listen. Totally take notes. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.